Do you remember Carlos from from Spain? Anyways, Carlos is saying that they're not allowed to leave their house. Is it like that in Turkey as well, or can you go
No.
outside?
Yeah, no, we can go out.
That's good. Yeah.
Yes, it's good. But we want it to be just like in the Peru because in this situation, people go out and they make the others get the virus. So
Yeah.
they make it more contagious.
Yes. Yeah. There's a lot of people who aren't being safe.
Yes. Thank you.
Well, wonderful. Well, we are going to get going right away here, I think. But I'm just going to test Andre's microphone first. Okay. Good talking to you.
Okay. Thanks.
Andre, how are you doing, my friend?
Hi.
Hello. How are you?
I'm fine.
It has been a while. Yeah. We haven't seen each other in a while. Good to see you both. How are you?
I'm fine.
Good.
Okay, hello, how are you?
Hello. It's good to see you. I'm just gonna, Corinne, I'm gonna stop your sharing just so I can be on the big screen.
Yeah, that's fine.
Let me get you in there. And
you want me to stop it?
I think I can stop sharing. I can force you. I've got the power. Whoa, the ultimate power. So it's so wonderful to see you. Well, Andre, are you going to share something about Peru today? We would love to hear from you. Do you have something you would like to share from Peru? Turkey is going to share some slides and talk about biospheres in Turkey. Will you be sharing about Peru? Oh, you're muted, buddy. There you go.
I can share you about my city.
Wonderful. That would be lovely. We'd like to hear about, I think it would be great for Turkey and Canada and Peru to share about their cities. That would be wonderful. Thank you, Andre. Okay, so we will let you know. We'll let you know when it's your turn, okay? All right, good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to World Water Day 2020. Now, it is, I was saying yesterday, I came up this thing and I thought I was pretty brilliant. So I'm going to say again, we are the quarantine. Not quarantine, but the quarantine. We're here together. We're fighting the quarantine blues with a nice global video conference on World Water Day to sort of celebrate how we are all shared through our oceans and our waterways and our ecosystems, and that though we might be separate in our homes, we are all living in this world together. And there's kind of nothing like a global pandemic to make you feel like you're one with your fellow friends all over the place. And I mean, as we navigate this really difficult, challenging time, it's important to think about the ways that we are all connected and we are all responsible for caring for each other and caring for our neighbors and caring for our environment and our ecosystems and our world. And water is so integral to that whole relationship. It is central to who we are as people and as cultures. And I am so happy to welcome you together today to have this conversation and to think about not just our social responsibilities in terms of taking care of ourselves, but in our environmental responsibilities and taking care of being good. In English, we say good stewards. So we steward, we take care of the earth. And how we do that. So we have students here today from Canada and from Turkey and from Peru. And I'm so happy to welcome you all together. And we're a small group. We had 14 countries signed up for today. But with the pandemic as it is, I think it is just difficult for everyone to log on. So we are live streaming to the internet. So people might be joining elsewhere. We've advertised it on Twitter and Facebook. So welcome all of our live stream friends, if that's how you're joining us. But for those who might watch later, I want to welcome them too, because it's not about just right now. It's about the conversations that might happen tomorrow when people watch this video online, or in 2 weeks. And we want to welcome all of you guys to that as well. My son is here as well, so he might pop into the conversation. We're all just getting by these days in terms of how we're doing our work. So today's sort of progress is we're gonna welcome everyone, and you'll have a time to introduce yourself and your school. You can say maybe something interesting about what's going on right now. And then we're going to go to Corinne, who is our guest speaker today. And she's gonna give us a wonderful overview. She's a specialist in water, and she's worked with the UN, and she's done amazing things. I'm so excited to have her here to share her knowledge with us on water. And then we're going to give time for each of you to present. So time for Turkey to present, time for Peru to present, and we will have some questions and dialogue time. So it's going to be a wonderful morning. I'm so excited to have you all here. Maybe we'll start. Gule or Irem, are you going to introduce your school, or would you like one of your friends to introduce your school?
I and Jem are going to introduce.
Awesome. Go ahead. It is your turn, Irem. You are welcome to introduce yourself.
Okay. My name is Irem, and I'm a 10th grader in Binnaz Rıdvan Ege Anatolian High School. Our school is in the capital city of Turkey, and we have a club to prepare for the conferences and activities in UNESCO. And we normally meet up at school, but because of the recent incidents, which is the closure of the school, we did all our work online by talking to each other via social media. And now Jim is going to say a few words too. And done.
Hi, is my sound clear?
Yes, you're great.
Okay, how are you?
How are you doing there?
I'm fine, thank you. How about you? Sorry?
Would you like to introduce more?
Yes.
Well, yeah.
As Irem said, our schools are closed because of the coronavirus, and so we are doing all activities from home as our school's UNESCO club. Our school's name is Dr. Binnaz Ege Rıdvan Ege Anatolian High School. We are a pilot and a project school, and our school is located in the capital city of Turkey, Ankara. We have all opportunities like computer room, art room, music room, libraries, labs, cafeteria, and more. There are over 600 students, 50 teachers, and 50 classes in our school. The fun fact about our school is that the most private state high school is our school, which means it's not a college, but it has no difference than a college. We are so happy to participate in a projects like that, so thank you.
Thanks so much. It's so wonderful to have you all here today.
Thank you.
Andre, would you like to introduce your school?
Yeah, my college is Science School, and my school is a school with teaching learning by power methodology. It has a wide and friendly and infrastructure. It's eco-friendly. Yeah. The school also has a green roof in where the children plant the vegetables or fruits, and they are experiment, yeah, about the about the farm, yeah, and where the students plant some vegetables. Likewise, it was a meteorological station, my school. In the school, the teachers apply teaching based on projects, and students have developed several projects as computer programmation, glove projects, and mosquitoes. Glove projects about the climate change. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andre. Thank you so much for sharing. That was wonderful. All right. So we have another student, Anissa from Bangladesh, has joined us, and she would like to introduce her school. So I'm going to invite her to come and speak now. Anissa, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Wonderful.
Hi. Yeah. So we're here from Bangladesh, and our school's name is Vikarnasan School. It is an all-girls school, and it was established a good 60 years ago.
Mm.
We currently don't have any classes because of the coronavirus spread, but we are all, taking online classes like most of the other schools here.
Mm-hmm.
And we're really excited about this.
Thanks so much for joining. It's 9 p.m. at night for you guys, so
yeah.
Way to go with the time changes. Awesome. Thank you so much. And I can't wait to hear do you guys have a little bit you'd like to share as well at the end? We're inviting each of the countries participating to share. You don't have to, but if you would like to say a little bit about waterways, I know that we had a great, someone from your school joined our water conference yesterday and had some awesome things to share. If you would like to as well, I'll invite you at the end to share then. Sound good?
Okay, yeah.
Wonderful. And then finally, we have our student here from Canada. Thomas, would you like to say hello to everyone?
Hello. Yeah, I'm Thomas. I'm from Fox Creek, Alberta, small town in Western Canada. I currently attend the U of A, and I'm taking an undergraduate degree in social studies for my Bachelor of Education. For the coronavirus pandemic, we've been all pretty much doing stuff from online now, and online classes, online conferences. So that's pretty much what's been going on.
It is a crazy time, but we appreciate you being here, and thank you so much for bringing the Canadian voice to the conversation. Hopefully more Canadians will be watching us online in the next coming days. So Corinne, or Dr. Schuster-Wallace is joining us from Saskatchewan. And I'm going to throw over to her to have her introduce herself, but she's done some amazing work across Canada and across Africa and around the world in water. And I'm so excited for her to share her knowledge with us today. Thank you, Corinne.
It's great to be here. Thank you, Sarah. I'm so looking forward to having a conversation with you. And please call me Corinne. So let me share my screen if I can still figure that out. There we go. All right. And these first couple of slides are actually Sarah. So obviously we're here for World Water Day for the Youth Action. And I'd just like to talk to you about ripples. And that's deliberate because water is so central to who we are as people, to our environment, and to our economy. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And I'm going to take you on a whirlwind tour. So bear with me. And if you have any questions, then let us know, wave your hand, flag, and Sarah will see you and we'll figure out and work that through. And Sarah, so this is the agenda, Sarah. We've done the school introduction. Did you want to do the land acknowledgements? And then I can start with my presentation if that works for you.
Sounds great. So we are joining you here from the Treaty 6 land, which is the traditional meeting territories of the Dene Nakodo Sioux, the Saulteaux, the Blackfoot, and the Métis. We welcome and thank everyone who is gathering all these lands, as people have gathered on them for many, many years.
And we pay our respects to our ancestors, but also to each other. So really appreciate being here and being able to be in this place at this time, in spite of the coronavirus. And I know that these are the schools that were meant to participate, and hopefully they're either live streaming or they're be able to watch the recording. So again, these are very strange times for all of us. And so hopefully you'll be able to catch up somehow. And that's me. And I was asked to introduce myself. And so I have to give you a little bit of a life journey on this, because who I am really is all about water. And even in high school, any project that I had to do in geography, I did on water. And in fact, my mum still remembers the time because I couldn't drive and I wanted to go and study the local stream. And so she drove me there, and the farmer forgot that I was coming, and he'd left his bull in the field. And so we got chased by the bull, and we had to actually walk up the stream to keep away from the bull. So even my family has been dragged into all of the water things that I do. I started in my university. I studied glaciers. I studied snow and ice. And then I realized that water was connected to more than just the environment. And so I started looking at water and health. And so I've done a lot of work, as Sarah mentioned, looking at water and climate change and impacts on health and impacts on infectious diseases, and then as again in East Africa, looking at local water security in rural and remote communities, particularly in Kenya and Uganda. And I've taken graduate students on field courses over to East Africa, so a little bit like you're doing virtually, so that we could share the experiences and link Canadian graduate students with East African graduate students who are all interested in water. And then finally, links with Sustainable Development Goals, and we'll be talking about that. And I'm actually going to be putting you on the spot because I've got a few questions for you in the same way you've probably got questions for me. So this is who I am. You'll realize very quickly I'm very passionate about water. I'm very passionate about learning all the time. And I have children, and they ice skate, hockey and figure skating. And so I'm always around frozen water, particularly in Saskatchewan. In Northern Canada, we have a lot of snow and ice as well. So that's really me, all about water, all around water. So I've got a question for you, and I'd like to know what you know about the Sustainable Development Goals.
Great question. So Iram, what do you guys, what have you studied in your school about the SDGs or the Sustainable Development Goals? Does that is it a term that you guys use in your school as a UNESCO school?
Not really. We haven't discussed this, but I know a few things about it. Actually, I don't know much, so you can ask someone else.
No, that's fine. I mean, that's what part of learning is, learning new words and learning how they relate to the things that we already know. I understand. Corinne, would you like to explain it for them?
I certainly can. So the Sustainable Development Goals were established in 2015, and it was a decision by all of the member states of the UN. And so all of the countries and civil society in all countries worked together in the years before 2015 to decide what was important. And they wanted to look at how to balance people, the environment, and the economy. We talk about the 3 Ps, the people, planet, and profit. And so the Sustainable Development Goals were all about that. And there's one specifically on water. It's SDG 6. And as you can see from this slide, it's all about clean water and sanitation, but it goes beyond that. So it has separate targets underneath that. And so it's about universal access. So that's access for everyone to drinking water, everyone, everywhere. It's universal access to sanitation. So again, everyone, everywhere. That's in your home, in your school, in your work, in the communal areas, so in hospitals and healthcare facilities, in markets, everywhere. And there's also targets on wastewater treatment, that we should always treat our water, and we'll talk a little bit about that later, and about water efficiency, so making sure that we're using water as best we can to protect the environment, but also for social development and for economy. And we also want to protect and restore local water-related ecosystems. And in order to do that, we have to have local engagement, and we have to support particularly low and middle income countries. From high income countries, they need to support and share knowledge and share experience, and also share funds and resources. And so that's the water-related SDG. But as I said, it's one of 17 SDGs, and here are all of them. And you can see that there are 4 environmental ones at the bottom here. and including the water one. There's an oceans one, and there's a climate action. And then these are the society one, and they're all about reducing hunger, health, education, sustainable cities, and sustainable consumption, and all of the things that we need to be a sustainable society. And then the last couple are about the economy. And then the final one, number 17 at the top, is all about the partnerships that we need to be able to achieve them. And as you saw with the water goal, SDG 6, there are targets underneath. And all of the other 16 goals have targets. They have their own targets. But 40 of those targets link back to water. So water is across all of these targets. And so it really is one of those essential elements, not only because we know it's essential for life, it's essential for our livelihoods. We use it for leisure, right? We need it for food. And so the Sustainable Development Goals just show that interconnectedness, and it also shows where we should be going. And so if you haven't seen them before, I encourage you to look them up, and I can send a link through Sarah to the UN website, because they have a dedicated website for the Sustainable Development Goals. And you, as the younger generation, you really need to be looking at these and advocating, and it ties in with all of the things you've been doing. The Low Carbon Project, that's the climate action. And I'm sure that you've been looking at videos and talking about, and perhaps with Greta Thunberg. No, it really is you as the youth that are going to get us to achieve these Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. And what's really interesting is that the coronavirus has actually started to help in terms of air pollution, in terms of water quality. And so we're seeing some positive benefits to our environment because all of us are staying inside and because we're reducing our activities and we have less cars on the road. And so it'll be interesting to see if we can actually maintain some of the environmental benefits. I don't mean that we should live like this forever, but that maybe we can maintain some of the good practices that come out of the emergency situation that's coronavirus. So how do you think we're doing? Just give us a thumbs up. Do you think that started in 2015, we're now in 2020, so we've been 5 years and they're meant to go to 2030. What do you think? Do you think we're doing pretty good, not so good, or pretty bad? Show me your thumbs.
Yeah, that's a tough one. Maybe a middle.
Where do you think we are? Yeah, right in the middle somewhere? I can see some thumbs. Well, here we go. This is how we're doing. Sort of not so great, really, right? If you look at drinking water, then globally, we're at 71%, which isn't bad, and we're improving all the time. But as we'll see later in my talk, we're not doing really well. And sanitation, we're doing even worse. Hygiene, which is hand washing, not so bad. And look at these dots, these dashes. What do you think these dashes mean on wastewater and water quality and water efficiency? What might they mean?
Anyone have a guess? You're welcome to unmute if you think you might know.
No? Well, look, we've got none, but is someone there?
No, we have some discussions, but I think they're all sort of waiting for the answer here.
Waiting for the answer? Well, I happen to have it. I do have the answer, which is just as well. Otherwise, you could cut me off now. We don't have the data. These aren't being monitored in every country. So a piece for homework for you. I know you're doing virtual classes. You don't need any more homework, but check out what your country monitors and check out what they're measuring with the Sustainable Development Goals, because we don't have enough data to estimate what the wastewater treatment is and what our water quality is or our efficiency. And so you see as well, water stress and our ecosystems. We really don't know. And until we can start measuring, then we won't be in a position to be able to manage, because we don't know what the problems and the challenges are or how good we're doing. And so that's a really key piece here. So again, check it out and see. And I'd be interested through Sarah what you find out on some of these, because I've got another few pieces of research for you to do as well.
Awesome.
So, water in Canada. I live in Canada. I've been here. I'm originally from Britain, but I've been in Canada since I started my graduate degrees. So I thought I'd like to share with you what Canada looks like. And you may wonder why a water researcher in Canada is doing the work that I'm doing. Well, because Canada's top 10 country around the world for the amount of water that we have. But we use an awful lot of it for our economy. One of our main exporters is agriculture, which uses a lot of water. We have mining and oil and gas industries that use a lot of water. We have hydroelectric power. And I know a lot of Latin American countries have hydroelectric power potential, and same in Africa, a lot of potential, some of which people have started using. So we have a lot of water, but we also use a lot of water, and we use it through activities and industries that actually pollute it. And the other piece of this is that 85% of the Canadian population, we have a big country, but a relatively small population of about 37 million, but 85% of us live right down near the border with the United States. And where do our rivers flow? 60% of them flow north. And so again, where the people are and where the water's going is very different. The other thing at play here, and we'll talk about this a little later, is climate change. And some of the studies coming out of Canada by our Ministry of Natural Resources have indicated that particularly in northern Canada, we're warming at 2 and 3 times the expected rate. And so we really are seeing huge changes in our weather patterns and in our water resources because of that. And so we're getting floods, we've had droughts, we've had fires, and again, we're a very wide country. And so we have sort of almost tropical-like rainforests on the west coast, and we have semi-arid prairies in the middle, and then we have a maritime climate and sort of a cooler climate on the east coast. And then in the north, we have a lot of snow and ice, and we have places where the sun doesn't set in the summer, and where it doesn't come up above the horizon in the winter. So again, we have this very large geographic extent. Most of our population is in the south. Our rivers are going north, and we have climate change. And so we've had forest fires that have destroyed towns, just like in California. Fort McMurray was virtually destroyed a couple of years ago. And so we're having to deal with these issues and challenges in Canada. And I said that I wanted to talk about climate change, and I know all of you are familiar with climate change. So this is just a reminder of why climate change and water are linked. Do you remember the hydrological cycle? The water cycle? Just nod your heads. Yes, everybody's learned the water cycle. So water evaporates, it condenses in the air, and then it precipitates, right? What drives that? Energy. Energy drives that. And what are we doing with climate change? If you look down here, we're increasing the energy in our atmosphere. And so what we're doing is we're hyper-energizing the water cycle. And that's why we're getting more rain in some places, less rain in others. We're getting more intense rainfall events and storms. And that's what's changing the dynamics and that's the direct link between the climate change, which is hyper-energizing the atmosphere of the planet, and the water cycle that depends on that energy to drive the evaporation, condensation, and precipitation. And so this here is a map. It's from the Guardian newspaper, and it shows how December 2018 and November 2019 compared with They're 1951 to 1980. Look at this. And remember I said about the warming in the north and that we've got sort of 2 to 3 times faster warming? Look at these dark red anomalies. The last decade was the warmest on record ever since the late 1800s, way before our time. So again, things are changing, and they're changing really quickly, and perhaps quicker than the scientists predicted. And so that's why SDG 13 is climate action. Again, what does it mean? Well, this is Canada, but you can see that climate change is affecting us from coast to coast to coast. We've got permafrost thawing, which is frozen ground, permanently frozen ground, because our north is so cold. Well, now that it's warming up, that ground is thawing. So then roads buckling and subsiding because the ground is melting, and so it's not solid anymore. And so people can't go, the roads aren't available. Lots of people don't even have roads into their communities. And so they use the ice to carry their food supplies and their petrol or their gas. And so again, the period when the ice is strong enough is getting shorter and shorter. So they're not getting the food supplies up there, and they're not getting the petrol and the gas up there that they need to be able to go through. So life in the north is getting a lot more expensive. And as I said, we have forest fires, and we've had floods across the country, and droughts in the prairies. And so you can see all of this. But I'd like to take it global. And this is from the Natural Disaster Report. So look at this. In 2018, there were 16 droughts compared to 17 between 2008 and 2017. The same with floods, 127 in 1 year around the world versus 153 in 10 years. And the storms, 95 in 1 year versus 101. So we are getting more and more frequent extreme events.
Sorry, that's remarkable. So just to clarify, that is all that in 2018 happened in 1 year versus what happened in 10 years altogether.
10 years at the bottom, yes.
That is amazing. Because at first I was like, oh, well, that's not much of a change from 1 year. But you're saying like the bottom is the total over 10 years and the top is just 1 year.
Mm-hmm.
That is amazing. So thanks for clarifying.
Yeah. So, but what's really interesting is that we're managing to cope with these events better. So the loss of life isn't quite as high, and the costs to our economy are not quite as high. But the point is, they're more and more frequent. And we can't really talk about floods and droughts and wildfires just in terms of the cost to the economy or the damages. Because if you lose everything that you had, then it's your psychological and your emotional well-being. And we can't put a price on that. And so we have to remember that when we're talking about climate change, when we're talking about water and water-related disasters and high-impact events, extreme events, it's not just the monetary cost. It's the cost to people. And it's the same, we're seeing it with COVID-19, right? It's not just people's physical health, it's their mental and emotional and psychological health that's being impacted because we're trying to stay away from people, because we're scared, because we're worried. And so, again, thinking about it in that context and thinking about it broader than just, oh, well, it cost the economy this much. So I'd like to jump a little bit and go to drinking water. And I don't know how many of you have seen this before, but this is a map of 2017. This is the latest data that we have. And this is about how many people had basic drinking water services. Basic drinking water is that it's protected. So it's a spring or a well, something that is that at least some attempt has been made to prevent pathogens from getting into it. And it has to be within a 30-minute round trip. So it doesn't have to be in your garden and on your property. It doesn't have to be in your house. It has to be within 30 minutes. And these are the countries, mainly in sub-Saharan Africa, that you can see have got less than 75% of people who can actually access water within 30 minutes walk of their house. 785 million people around the world. And of those, 144 million people still use surface water. So they still use lakes and streams and rivers, which really aren't safe drinking water sources. So think about that. I know most of you are in cities, and many of these people are in rural areas, but think about who in your country has better access or less access. And think about the Sustainable Development Goal target, SDG 6, which was universal access to drinking water. Drinking water everywhere for everyone. We're not there yet, but we're getting there. And we're certainly, every year, it's improving. But we need to make it happen a little faster. So what about Canada? Well, Canada, 99% of us have access to safely managed drinking water services. 99%, which is fantastic, far better than a lot of countries, especially in sub-Saharan Africa. But 1% of our population is 375,000 people. So what are those 375,000 people doing? Well, unfortunately in Canada, most of those 375,000 people are Indigenous people. They're First Nation, Inuit, or Métis. And a lot of them are First Nation living on reserves. And so we have a huge disconnect in Canada between our Indigenous people and our non-Indigenous people, particularly when it comes to things like drinking water and to health. And so you can see here that the federal government in Canada has actually committed to eradicating drinking water advisories in First Nation communities by 2021. And they're doing a good job. They're working towards that. What we have is many of our First Nation communities, either they have old drinking water treatment systems, or they don't have people who can operate them, or there's some other problem with their water, the source water quality. And so they have to boil their water every day to clean their teeth. They've got to boil their water to eat, to make their tea. Everything, they have to boil their water, and they have to be careful with showers, and children have to be careful as well, because in baths, young children like to play and they like to drink the water, and that can be dangerous for them. So how many of you have ever had to boil your water before you drink it? Maybe you still do, because in some places around the world, it's a similar situation where you can't trust the water coming into your taps, and you either have to treat it or boil it in some way. Has anyone had that experience? No?
I'm looking for hands. I don't see any hands.
No? Well, again, we're among the lucky.
Carlos is there. Looks like our Peruvian participants.
Tell us, Carlos.
Yes. In theory, we have very clean water, but if you go to the practice and just try to measure it, you cannot be quite sure. Even in the capital, I just made I take part in a seminar 10 years ago. We were graduates from the German universities in South America, and we visit the water treatment plant from the capital. And if you see the amount of water, heavy metals that comes in the water, plus biological things, you start wondering if the water was safe. No, people says, well, they did a good job, but there are some times in which water is not very, very safe. And the other reason is that the capital city, Lima, which has 10 million people, is actually in the middle of the desert. So it's the second largest city in the world that is in the desert. And that's where water is very scarce. So the water situation in the country, I think it's not very good.
Thank you. And thank you for sharing. And absolutely, you're not alone. And again, that goes to where we choose to live, because the same with California and a lot of these floods, we've built on the floodplains and we've forgotten that these rivers periodically flood. And so when they do, it really does a lot of damage. And because we're in places that, again, perhaps, as you say, the water resources aren't there to sustain that 11 million people in a desert. But this is certainly not something that is unusual in countries around the world, and climate change is going to alter that. And some countries, some places in some countries will end up with more rainfall, and some places in some countries will end up with less. And so this is why we need to understand the potential impacts of climate change, and we need to be planning for them. And we need to be planning for them within this Sustainable Development Goal framework. And so this is another piece that goes a little bit to what you were saying, Carlos. There was a study in Canada across 10 of our major cities. And again, we've had piped drinking water in our cities for over 100 years. The problem is that we haven't necessarily replaced pipes. And so some of them break, and that causes problems. The other thing is that some of our pipes, particularly going into our houses, are lead. And whereas at the time we didn't know that lead could cause health problems, and lead was very malleable, so it was easy to make into pipes. But now we know that some of the lead in the pipes are leaching out. And I don't know if any of you have heard of Flint, Michigan. That's another case study that you can look at, because it was very much a town where there are a lot of ethnic minorities, single female-headed households. So the socioeconomic demographies are very different, and they had water problems and they had difficulty making their voices heard. And so again, an example of where the poorest in society are affected and can't really do anything about what's going on. And it's the same globally with rural communities being less connected, being more isolated, smaller groups of people, and they're the ones that don't have the access in the same way that a lot of people in cities do. And again, low and middle income countries versus high income countries. Now, what's interesting here is when we're talking about universal access to water that's potable, that we can drink and that doesn't make us sick, we're actually going backwards in some urban centers in Europe and in North America because of these problems with aging infrastructure and the lead in the pipes. And so again, drinking water access is something that we need to be thinking about, from the pharmaceuticals in our wastewater and the personal care products and the as you said, the metals and the contaminants that we can't necessarily get out of our wastewater, and so is coming back into our drinking water. And this goes back to that environmental stewardship that Stara was talking about this earlier today. And I just want to kind of take a step back from water, because this applies to more than just water, but it certainly applies in water. And again, I don't know how many of you have really thought about equality and equity, because a lot of people use them interchangeably, and they're not. And I always use equity, and this is why. Because equality is simply making sure that everyone has the same thing. And you can see here that all three have been given a box. But this person still can't watch the game. This is equity, where people haven't been given the same thing, they've been given what they need. And it's about giving everyone what they need to be able to operate, to be able to maximize their potential. And so that's what equity is. Now, this one here, liberation, is about taking away the systemic barriers that existed in the first place. And so we don't have to worry about making sure that everybody is given the resources that they need, because everybody's on the same playing field. And so I want you to think about that when you're thinking about low carbon, when you're thinking about climate action, when you're thinking about water, anything to do with the environment. Because what we find is that the poorest in society, they're the ones that depend on environmental services the most. And so we really need to be looking at equity or liberation for people. And again, that's part of the Sustainable Development Goals.
Now,
So
I
yes.
know that you have amazing slides to keep sharing, but I do want time. We're down to our last sort of 15 minutes here.
Okay.
And I'd love the chance for students to both ask you questions, but also share a bit about their water situation, because we've learned so much about, you know, the importance of equity, the importance of stewardship, and I'd love to hear what's going on in some of our participating countries to sort of, you know, where are these commonalities? Where are the differences across the world today?
Okay.
Would you mind if I sort of briefly interrupted you and then we came back if we had some more time? Do you want to focus? Do you have one last slide that you really need to share with them?
What I'd like to do is bring that back at the end, because I've got some tips on what we can do.
Wonderful.
So this is, and I think I'm pretty close, because this is about energy and water and food and water, and then we'll talk to everyone else and then come back to the last slide if that's okay.
Perfect. Sounds great. All right. Oh, wonderful. So I'm going to maybe stop sharing, and we are going to, so Iram, from your school, we'll have Turkey go first, and then we'll throw it over to Peru, and then we'll invite Bangladesh to share. So that'll be our order: Turkey, Peru, Bangladesh. Now we only have 2 minutes. As we said before, there's only 2 minutes to share, and then we'll bring it back together for final thoughts from Corinne and any additional questions. Does that sound good, everyone? So Turkey, I'm gonna now, who would you like to share slides, or do you want me to share your slides? I can do either.
Can you share them?
I would love to. Let me do that right now. A minute. Okay, they're coming up. They're coming up. Just on my other computer here. Okay. Let's get. You're ready to go.
This presentation is about Gemli Biosphere Reserve, which is the only biosphere reserve in Turkey. I'm going to talk about the animal species living in there and contributing its economy, and also the importance of the area environmentally and historically. The main ecosystem types in the Gemli Biosphere Reserve are boreal coniferous forest and temperate deciduous forest, including tree species such as lime tree and sessile oak. One of the most important bee species, Caucasus bees, have remained untouched in the basin. It also is a very important area when the bird migration route is considered. It has a very traditional rural lifestyle with hazelnut farming and honey production, which are the main economic activities in the reserve. The chemicals and pesticides haven't been used thanks to the local farmers who realized that those tainted the taste of goods. The area has been conquered many times by several empires, such as Byzantine and Ottoman. It has numerous archaeological sites that proves it is a great example of cultural combination. And Jem is going to go on.
Yes. Can you turn back to the other slide? Thank you. I'm going to talk about biosphere reserves first. Biosphere reserves aim to realize regional development by establishing a compatible relationship with sustainability principles between colonization and land use. Biosphere reserves have three basic functions in terms of protection, development, and logistics. And also, biosphere reserve consists of three zones: the absolute protection zone, the buffer zone, and the transition zone. There are 507 biosphere reserves in 102 countries in the world. And one of them is Artvin Gemili in Turkey. Can you? Yes, this is the photo from this biosphere reserve, Artvin. Gemini is located in the Black Sea region of Turkey's most green and blue. Because of this reason and lack of urbanization, it does not face a great water hazard. On the contrary, there is a risk of flooding in the region. Factors such as water quality and quantity are at the same level with our country, which is intermediate. The region is under protection by foundations, organizations, and government through projects and audits. Although there is not a serious problem at the moment, it's imperative to take measures against the possibilities of climate change and water crisis in the future. Thanks for listening us.
Wonderful. Thanks, you guys. Woo-hoo! I think it's great to hear some of those, even though it's not at risk right now. And I think there's some of that conversation in Canada too, where we don't feel the emergency of it, but we know that it's important to start thinking about environmental stewardship and how are we protecting and prioritizing. So thank you so much. I see that similarity there. All right. Does anyone have any questions for our friends in Turkey before we move on? All right, maybe we'll think about questions and save some room for the end. Andre in Peru, would you like to say a little bit about your city? Oh, wonderful. You're ready to go. I see you've unmuted.
In Huánuco, the Peru have rulers, about the preservation of the natural resource, based on helping the environment. The problem is that people doesn't stick to the rules, and states don't have the few actions. In Huánuco, we have the 2 rivers, but the principal rivers is Huallaga, and Huallaga have high level of pollution, and we are. And the water of we was used, the water trash in the river, the dirty water is trash in the water, and in my school we are doing a project about water treatment, and the quality of the Huallaga water. In Huallaga, the pollution is very high, the grade.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. It's to hear that there's a great deal of water pollution. I know maybe our friends in Bangladesh will talk about that too, because that is what we heard from them yesterday. That a big problem was that the government could not keep the rules and the policies where people would actually follow. So there was rules and laws about pollution, but oftentimes the people didn't listen, and they just put pollution, chemicals, garbage into the water, and because the water was so important that it made it too dirty for people to drink. And so yesterday Bangladesh was saying a very similar problem to that. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions for our friends in Peru before we move to Bangladesh? No? Thank you, Andre. Oh, yes, go ahead.
So what are the measures the community and the governments are taking to stop this pollution in Peru?
My Yeah, my government, lamentablemente. Sadly, my government is doing nothing.
Oh.
Yeah, actually, there are few organizations.
Mhm. Is
Yeah.
it
Yeah, this is the situation of my country.
so is it more organizations and people who are doing work for the water, or is it the government?
Actually, the government is doing nothing, but there are people who are
But
working
people.
on that, and those ones are working. But is that the work is kind of slow because most of them don't have the help of the government, and if someone doesn't have the help of the government, it's kind of difficult to do something. And for example, in Huánuco, as Andres said, our river is full of pollution, and
On camera.
no one is caring about that, but just the young people as we. And we try to do something, but sometimes it's kind of impossible.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for sharing that. So what I heard you say was that the government's not doing very much, but that there are organizations and people who are trying to advocate for change and trying to make things happen. Do you think that is what you were trying to get across? Yes, does that sound okay? So I think that it really shows, especially youth have this amazing power. And I think Greta has really shown that youth and coming together as a community can really make change happen. And it can make governments listen. And so if we come together and say, this is important, youth and our parents and our peers, everyone around us, and if we tell the government this is important, they will listen. Greta has shown that youth have a very strong and powerful voice that hasn't been used before, maybe, and has such importance right now in our world. Does that make sense? So I want you to be inspired to do work for water in your community. All right, Bangladesh, would you like to say a bit about water in your country or your community?
Yeah, sure. So the WHO estimates that 97% of the people of Bangladesh have access to water, and only 40% have proper sanitation. And with a staggering 60% of the population that has to endure unsafe drinking water, the nation is definitely in a lot of danger. The availability of this water greatly fluctuates throughout the year, as the warmer season brings massive amount of water in frequent monsoons, and the cooler season brings drought. So there is no stable way to provide water to everyone in the country. It always goes up and down, and there is no stability. So the nation is more or less just, going through this or that problem. Well, we actually live in Dhaka, which is the capital, and it is in the middle of the country. But if we go over to the port city, that is Chittagong in the south, the city is surrounded by various rivers and ponds and lakes, and this is where they get all those cargos, and this is the international link, like seaports and stuff. So, because of this amount of ships that come and go in because of this ports and seaports, the seas and rivers, they get massively polluted, such as the Kornafuli River. I myself have seen the amount of pollution that occurs because of these, and it is horrible. I mean, the image you have that you would want to go to a natural place and be with your family and have this like picnic on a boat, it just gets ruined because of the pollution that we see. And it's really sad to see that.
Mm-hmm. Can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah,
so
sure.
Corinne was talking about how oftentimes it's in Canada too, that the access to water is related to poverty and to equality of access. Would you say that's the similar in Bangladesh, that those who are maybe wealthier in the community have access to more water and more leisure water, and that those in perhaps who have lower socioeconomic means have less water?
Well, the accessibility to water in our country basically depends on where you decide to live. Which is to say, if you decide to live around ocean, around lakes and ponds, in like a village, you get access to water, but it is more or less contaminated or polluted. So you have to filter through a lot of it. But on the other hand, if you come back to Dhaka or any of the cities that aren't exactly around these rivers and lakes, the people in these slums don't exactly have access to water at all. Sometimes they, even if they do get water, it's polluted or it's not safe. So it basically depends on where you choose to live, and if you do not live around these places, how your economic conditions.
So just quickly, raising hands or thumbs or something, how many can drink water from their taps? Can you drink tap water in your home?
I think it's pretty safe.
Yeah.
No.
Interesting, but those in Turkey, you're not raising your hand, and in Peru, you're not raising your hand. I think, and in Canada, for sure, our cities are very safe, but it is on our reservations where there is no safe drinking water, and they have to bring in. And so sometimes we advocate to stop drinking bottled water. But if we made that a rule, there are people in Peru, there are people in Canada, there are probably people in Bangladesh as well, and even Turkey, who would not have drinking water without bottled water. So it's interesting when we think about fighting climate change and eliminating plastics, but for some, plastics are essential for water. Anyway,
should they be? But should they be?
And
that's part of the Sustainable Development Goals. If everybody had access, then maybe bottled water would be a luxury as opposed to a necessity.
So
it's all about you as youth.
So we're 5 minutes over. I'm going to give you Bangladesh another minute or two to finish up, but I'm conscious of the time. And then maybe we'll have a couple of questions, and we'll try to end by 10 after. If you need to leave, I understand, because we've gone over. But I'd love to hear a little bit more about Bangladesh and then have a little bit of question times. Corinne, if you don't mind hanging out for a minute or two longer. Awesome. Okay, back to you, Bangladesh.
All right, so a few years back, there were some problems due to the cargo unloading and loading. One of the ships sank, and there was a major oil leakage. So these are the kinds of problems that we have to deal with in the country. But on the other hand, the water reservoirs that gives water to the cities and the slums and all those are really those are dependent. You can depend on these. Those they go through a lot of filtration and whatnot. But if we are talking about how in the state of water in the country, it's in danger, and we as a community are taking steps to sustain water and to make it a lot cleaner and environment friendly. But besides that, the minorities of the country, specifically there's this minority who celebrate water in one of their traditional days. On the day of their New Year's, they have this celebration. They call it Pani Kala. Pani as in water, and Kala as in playing, so water playing. And this is how they celebrate water, which also gives the water a lot of validation and it reminds people of the importance of water, which ultimately fuels the need the people want to save this water. And because of all of these that are present, all of these traditions that are present, we as a community are going forward to sustain the water and make it more environment friendly. And I think in the future, in a couple of years, we would get a better environment. We would get a better, we would get better rivers. We would have safer cargo shipments and whatnot. And I think we're going towards we're going in a better direction.
Wonderful. It's always nice to end these with hope. So, Corinne, I know you wanted to give them sort of go out there message. And so I'm going to turn it to you to inspire them to make this change and to make this hope a reality.
Perfect. Thank you. And I'll be as quick as I can, because you can look up how much water you eat, and you can look up how much water you use in energy. And that was one of your homework pieces. But the other one was how much water you actually use. What seemed to be going forward at the moment. Oh, there we go. And I gave you pizza and chocolate as well. But we talked about droughts and floods, and I'll leave these with you, and hopefully they can be shared. But think about how much water you use every day, and think about how that changes urban and rural. In Canada, we use about 130. So that's quite a bit. But it was really interesting when you were talking about pollution, because I put together some photos, but you described it far better than I ever could, because we really don't look after our water, and we waste it with lawns and some other, washing our cars and golf courses. But what I really wanted to leave with you is what we can do, because it's really exciting. And we can do small things. We can turn the tap off when we're cleaning our teeth, and we can choose to eat foods that maybe don't use as much water to grow, and we can turn lights out, because when we save energy, we save electricity, and we can plant a garden that doesn't need as much water. We can recycle, which we talked about, and we can check and see where the water goes. So this is in Ontario, and they actually put yellow fish to show that if you put something down this drain, it's not going to the treatment plant, it's going to the river or the stream. And we can stop putting chemicals and drugs and pharmaceuticals and all kinds of things down the drain and down our toilets, because they all get out into the environment. And we can keep our environment tidy, because when we leave things around in garbage, that ends up contaminating our water, like you said. And finally, we can just make sure that we and our families, that we use low flush toilets, flow shower heads, showers instead of baths. There are all kinds of things that you can do. And I love the green roof, because that's something else you can do. It keeps it cooler, it's environmentally friendly, and it's water conservation, rain barrels, rainwater harvesting. So I'd love to see what projects you come up with, and how you keep going with the water quality ones that you're already doing in Peru as well. So it's been fantastic talking to you, and I'd love to keep chatting. So give me email me, chat with me, link up with me through Sarah. But you're a great group of students, and I really like what you're doing and what you're talking about with water. So be the next Gretas for sure.
Wonderful. Thank you for that inspiring charge that we all go out and be stewards of our communities and of our water. Now, does anyone have any final questions of our guest, Corinne, or of any of the other countries before we sign off for the day? All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for such a wonderful event, World Water Day. I mean, we were a small but mighty crew. It was wonderful learning from Turkey, from Peru, from Bangladesh. Thank you so much for joining. I'm so excited to share this video and this conversation with others. I know that it's been hard, and as we get used to going online more regularly from home. But we have a lot of upcoming events. And if you're looking for something to do in your evenings, if you're in Bangladesh or Turkey, we will be joining students around refugee issues, around treaty and indigenous knowledge issues, around, oh goodness, we have a bunch of different sessions coming up. And it's all, I'll be sending it to your teachers. It's all online. Please come back and share your thoughts. I'd love to hear more about what you think about what's going on in your community, and even how it relates to COVID. I think today we really saw those ties, we're all interrelated, whether it be water or anything else that brings us together as a community and as citizens of the world. So thank you, everyone, for joining us today. It was wonderful seeing and talking to you all. I hope to see you again soon. Bye, everyone. Goodbye.